My name is Richard Morgan. For as long as I can remember, I believe that the pillars of a strong marriage were trust, respect, and honesty. I married Victoria when we were young and full of hope for the future. We built our lives together on shared dreams and endless promises. Our home was our sanctuary, a place of warmth and familiarity. Little did I know that a shadow was creeping slowly into our lives, one that would ultimately shatter my belief in the sanctity of our bond. Victoria was everything I had ever desired. She was compassionate, graceful, and possessed a warmth that could brighten the darkest day. Our friends and family admired her, and I, as her husband, was endlessly proud. It wasn't long after our 10th anniversary that our family friend, Andrew Collins, re-entered our lives. Andrew had always been known as a reliable, trustworthy man, a close friend to both our families for many years. His affable manner and willingness to help whenever needed only strengthened our bond with him. At first, Andrew's presence was a source of comfort. He became an occasional guest in our home, sharing hearty laughs, stories of past adventures, and offering sound advice when the weight of everyday struggles bore down on us. I remember evenings when we'd sit in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace lighting our faces, and talk about everything from business ventures to personal challenges. Victoria would listen intently and smile, and I thought nothing of it. I trusted Andrew implicitly. He was, after all, like family. As time passed, however, subtle changes began to occur. I started noticing that Victoria's demeanor shifted ever so slightly when Andrew was around. It wasn't something overly obvious, a fleeting glance or a quiet smile that lingered too long. It was more a gradual change in her tone, a softness in her voice when she spoke about him, as if he held a place in her heart that no one else ever could. I chalked it up to the long-standing friendship between our families and assumed nothing more than admiration for someone who had been a supportive friend over the years. Yet, deep within me, a quiet seed of doubt began to germinate. I would catch Victoria lost in thought, her eyes reflecting a distant emotion, moments that coincided with Andrew's visits. I tried to dismiss these feelings, telling myself that I was overanalyzing trivial gestures. After all, I had no reason to suspect betrayal from the woman I loved. Our lives continued as usual, with Andrew joining us for dinners and weekend get-togethers. In these gatherings, I observed the dynamics, the way Victoria would sometimes share a private joke with Andrew, the subtle shift in her posture that made it seem as if she was leaning closer when he spoke. I began to wonder if there was more to their relationship than I had initially assumed, but my heart insisted that it was all innocent, a testament to a long-standing friendship. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves danced outside our windows, I found myself alone in the study with a heavy mind. I was reflecting on the subtle changes in our home life, the lingering doubts I had tried to ignore. While rummaging through some old boxes for forgotten mementos, I discovered a small envelope tucked away among family photos. Inside were handwritten letters and diary entries, some addressed to Andrew, filled with intimate details of emotions and confessions I had never heard Victoria speak of before. The words on the fragile pages struck me like a bolt of lightning. They revealed a depth of connection between Victoria and Andrew that went far beyond friendship. In her delicate handwriting, Victoria spoke of feelings that were both tender and forbidden, a secret longing for a man who had, until then, been nothing more than a trusted friend. The diary described moments of vulnerability when she felt unseen and unappreciated, and how Andrew's kind words and steady presence filled a void in her heart. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to process the revelation. I couldn't believe that the woman I had trusted, the partner with whom I had shared so many dreams, had harbored such feelings. The pages hinted at an emotional intimacy that I had never imagined, a betrayal that was slowly taking shape in the quiet corners of our life. I felt as though the ground beneath me had shifted, leaving me unsteady and filled with a profound sense of loss. In that moment, I resolved to keep my discovery secret. I couldn't confront Victoria immediately without knowing the full scope of her actions. Instead, I decided to observe, to watch for any further signs that would confirm my worst fears. The days that followed were heavy with silent tension. I noticed that Victoria became more guarded, her once open laughter now tinged with a subtle melancholy. Andrew's visits continued, and the bond between them grew ever more apparent. Each encounter became a lesson in pain and betrayal, a slow unspooling of the tapestry of our shared life. I began questioning every memory, every smile, every word of reassurance that once brought me comfort. How could I have been so oblivious? The pain of realization was both sudden and gradual, like the slow drip of water carving a canyon through solid rock. I spent sleepless nights trying to reconcile the person I thought I knew with the secrets that now lay before me. The love and trust that had been the foundation of my marriage felt tainted by shadows of deception. My heart ached with the weight of betrayal that had yet to fully reveal itself. Little did I know that this discovery was only the first step in a journey that would force me to confront a truth more painful than I ever imagined, a betrayal in the face of fate, orchestrated by the very person I had once considered a loyal friend of our family. In the weeks that followed my discovery, I found myself living in a state of quiet agony. I maintained a facade of normalcy for the sake of appearances, smiling at dinners, engaging in small talk with Andrew when he visited, and pretending that nothing had changed. Yet inside, I was a tempest of emotions, betrayal, confusion, and a deep-seated sadness that left me feeling isolated even in a crowded room. I began to document every interaction, every glance between Victoria and Andrew. At first, the evidence was subtle, a soft smile here, a lingering look there, but gradually, the signs became undeniable. I overheard whispered conversations when I passed by the kitchen, and caught Victoria's hand trembling as she reached for her phone when I entered the room unexpectedly. Every detail, no matter how small, compounded my sense of loss and violation. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner party where Andrew had stayed late, I found myself alone with Victoria in our living room. The air was thick with unspoken words. I mustered the courage to broach the subject gently, asking her how her day had been and if everything was all right. Her eyes, usually so warm and open, darted nervously, and she gave a curt nod. I pressed on, my voice barely above a whisper, "Victoria, is there something you'd like to tell me?" Her silence in response was more damning than any confession could have been. I felt my heart sink as I realized that the distance between us was widening, a gap filled with secrets and lies. In the days that followed, I watched as Victoria's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She became distant, her laughter hollow, and I sensed a growing internal conflict that she struggled to hide. Unable to contain my worry and suspicion any longer, I decided to confront the evidence directly. Late one night, when Victoria was out for what she claimed was an errand, I returned to the study to reread the diary entries I had discovered. With each page, the emotional depth of her hidden affair with Andrew became clearer. The words spoke of vulnerability, of loneliness, and of a desire to be seen and cherished in ways I had never provided. It was as if Victoria had been slowly unraveling, and Andrew's presence had become the catalyst for her deepest, most secret emotions. I began to wonder if I had somehow failed her, if the routine of our daily lives had blinded me to her silent cries for attention. Had I neglected her emotional needs? The questions tormented me as I struggled with a growing sense of inadequacy and self-doubt. Yet, even as I questioned myself, I knew that the betrayal was not solely my fault. Andrew, a man I had once respected, had exploited his position as a trusted friend to gain access to Victoria's most intimate thoughts. The realization that this friend had used his closeness to manipulate her feelings filled me with a bitter anger. I could not fathom how someone who had been part of our lives for so long could hide such treachery behind a mask of kindness. My nights turned into long sessions of restless contemplation as I pieced together every encounter, every secret meeting, and every stolen moment between them. I recalled a particular afternoon when I had returned home unexpectedly from work. I had found Victoria and Andrew in a quiet corner of our garden, engaged in a hushed conversation that left no room for ordinary friendship. Their voices were soft, their body language intimate, a language I had not witnessed between them before. The image haunted me, replaying over and over in my mind as I grappled with the implications. As the evidence mounted, so did my resolve. I knew that I could no longer remain a passive observer in my own life. The betrayal was no longer a distant whisper, it was a roaring declaration of deceit that could not be ignored. My heart pounded with a mix of sorrow and determination. I resolved to confront Victoria, to demand the truth about the relationship that had gradually consumed her and, by extension, our marriage. Yet, even as I steeled myself for the confrontation, a part of me trembled with uncertainty. Would Victoria admit the full extent of her betrayal? Could we ever salvage what had been so irrevocably broken? These questions haunted me as I prepared for the inevitable collision between truth and deception, a collision that would force both of us to confront the harsh reality of our lives. The days stretched on with agonizing slowness, each one a reminder of the secret that had invaded our home. I clung to hope that there might be a way to understand her pain, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But beneath that fragile hope lay a profound sorrow, a sorrow that whispered that fate had dealt us a cruel hand, a betrayal in the face of fate that would change everything. The day of reckoning arrived on a drizzly afternoon, the sky heavy with gray clouds mirroring the weight that burdened my heart. I had spent weeks in turmoil, wrestling with my doubts and gathering the courage to confront the woman I loved. As I stood in our living room, the silence between Victoria and me was palpable, a silence laden with secrets, regret, and the unspoken acknowledgement of betrayal. "Victoria," I began, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "We need to talk." Her eyes widened in startled recognition, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something fear, remorse, or perhaps both pass across her face. I pressed on. "I've noticed changes, and I've found evidence that suggests you've been hiding something from me." My words hung in the air, heavy with accusation and sorrow. Victoria's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the sofa, her eyes welling with tears. The room felt charged with tension, every second stretching into an eternity of anticipation and dread. With a trembling sigh, she finally spoke. "Richard, I never meant for you to find out this way." Her voice cracked under the strain of years of hidden pain. I asked her the questions that had plagued my every waking moment. "Who is Andrew to you, really? And what is it that you've been keeping secret?" Tears streamed down her face as she admitted the truth, a confession that seemed to tear through the very fabric of our shared life. She explained that her relationship with Andrew had begun innocently, as a trusted friend who listened when I was not around. Over time, though, he had become a confidant, a man who knew the parts of her heart that I had failed to understand. In moments of vulnerability, she had shared secrets and fears that she never voiced to me, believing that in his presence, she would finally be heard. Victoria's words were filled with both pain and regret. "I felt lost," she whispered, "and Andrew was there when I needed someone. I never wanted to hurt you, Richard. I was confused, and his kindness made me believe that I could find solace in him." The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, yet the betrayal was raw and deep. I felt as though every word was a knife cutting into the trust that had once been the cornerstone of our marriage. Anger and sorrow warred within me as I demanded to know if she had ever truly loved me. Was I not enough? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anguish and disbelief. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she pleaded for forgiveness, but I could see the remorse in every fiber of her being, a remorse for the secrets she had harbored and for the betrayal that had been allowed to grow in the shadows. The conversation turned into a torrent of emotions, screams of frustration, sobs of regret, and long silences where neither of us knew what to say. I recalled every moment of our happier past, every memory that had once made me believe that our love was invincible. Now, those memories felt tainted by the revelation that the very person I had trusted with my heart had become a stranger. In that confrontation, I realized that the betrayal was more complex than a single affair. It was a culmination of unmet needs, unspoken desires, and the subtle manipulations of a man who had exploited his closeness to us. Andrew's position as a longtime friend had given him access not only to our lives but to the most vulnerable parts of Victoria's soul. His betrayal was not an impulsive act. It was a carefully nurtured intimacy built on our shared trust, a trust that now lay in ruins. As the conversation wore on, I felt a profound sorrow that mingled with the anger. I wondered if our marriage could ever be repaired, or if the wounds were too deep. Every word exchanged that day added to the layers of grief and disillusionment, leaving me to question whether fate had truly dealt us a cruel hand. The realization was stark and painful. Our lives, once intertwined with promises and love, were now divided by a chasm of secrets. The confrontation ended with no clear resolution, only the understanding that our lives would never be the same. I left that room feeling broken, burdened by the weight of betrayal and the knowledge that I now had to walk a path of painful healing. The truth had been revealed, and with it came the heavy cost of lost trust and shattered dreams. In the weeks and months that followed that fateful confrontation, the landscape of our home and our lives changed irrevocably. Every room, every familiar corner, seemed to echo with memories of a past that could never be reclaimed. I found myself wandering through long, sleepless nights, the silence of our empty house a constant reminder of the betrayal that had reshaped our destiny. I knew that healing would not be immediate. The deep wounds inflicted by Victoria's betrayal, compounded by Andrew's exploitation of his position as our trusted friend, required time, introspection, and perhaps a measure of forgiveness that I was not sure I could ever muster. I sought solace in therapy, a journey into the recesses of my own pain. In those sessions, I tried to understand not only Victoria's actions but also my own shortcomings, a desperate search for answers as to where our love had faltered and how I might begin to rebuild the shattered trust. Victoria, too, embarked on her own path of redemption. Burdened by guilt and regret, she continued to seek help, determined to understand the complexities of her own emotions. We began to have long, painful conversations about the unmet needs that had driven us apart, the secrets that had slowly poisoned our intimacy. Each conversation was a small, tentative step toward healing, though the memories of betrayal often loomed large, threatening to pull us back into despair. I started to redefine what it meant to forgive. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about erasing the past, but rather about acknowledging the pain and choosing to move forward despite it. Every day was a struggle, a battle between the desire to hold onto the hurt and the hope that, somehow, we could reclaim a semblance of what we had lost. In the quiet moments, I would reflect on the love we once shared, the dreams we had built, and wonder if fate had offered us this betrayal as a test, a painful, yet necessary challenge that might ultimately lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves. Over time, I learned that healing was not a linear journey. There were days when the weight of the betrayal felt unbearable, and nights when the pain resurfaced with a vengeance. But there were also moments of clarity, a shared laugh over a long-forgotten memory, a gentle touch that hinted at the love that still lingered beneath the surface. In those moments, I dared to hope that redemption was possible, that the shattered fragments of our marriage might one day be pieced together with care and compassion. As I write these words, I remain uncertain of what the future holds. The scars of betrayal are deep, and the journey toward forgiveness is long and arduous. Yet, despite the pain, I have come to understand that life is a series of trials, a tapestry woven from both joy and sorrow, love and loss. Our story, marred by the treachery of a trusted friend and the painful unraveling of hidden truths, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I now see that fate, in its cruel irony, brought this betrayal into our lives to force us to confront our vulnerabilities. It was a harsh lesson in the fragility of trust and the unpredictable nature of love. And while the road ahead is uncertain, I hold on to the hope that, with time, our wounds will mend and the legacy of our past will give way to a future built on honesty, understanding, and the courage to love again. In the quiet aftermath of that storm, I continue my journey, one step at a time, carrying the burden of betrayal yet clinging to the possibility of renewal. My heart, though scarred, beats with a new rhythm, a rhythm that acknowledges both the pain of the past and the hope of a redeemed future. And perhaps, in time, the betrayal in the face of fate will transform from a source of sorrow into a catalyst for a love that is even stronger and more resilient than before.